Hey guys, while I wait for some parts to arrive for a TV project, I thought I would do a quick little radio project. This is for another customer who I restored a TV for a while ago, and when I dropped it off, I came back with some radios he'd like me to restore. So what we've got here is a little Kent midget radio. It took me a little while to find the service info, but eventually I figured out that the way to find it is that it's not Kent, it's Arvin or Noblet Sparks, I think. Yeah, Noblet Sparks. So Kent was a rebranding of it, in other words. And they made several versions. Eventually I figured out that it was an RE91. So, yeah, they really managed to shrink this down quite small. This is from the early 40s, 1941, I believe. So some of you are probably familiar with an All-American 5. This is actually just a 4-tube radio. And how did they get away with that? Well, they left out one of the IF stages. So it is actually a superhet, and they managed to do it with only 4 tubes. One of them is a rectifier tube. Of course, this being small, so small, there's no room for a power transformer, so it is powered right off the line. It's a hot chassis set. So rectifier right off the AC line. DL6 output tube, 12 SQ7, a combination IF and detector, and 12 SA7, that's your oscillator mixer tube, and there's the antenna. So imagine the performance isn't going to be so great, seeing as how it's basically missing a stage, but we'll see how it goes. I imagine it'll be able to receive local stations pretty well. And as I mentioned, it's a hot chassis, so here's your AC plug, a switch, and bam. That is not ground. That is one side of the AC line. You can make it a little bit safer by putting a polarized plug and putting the neutral side to this, which I will do. But there's always a possibility that your house isn't wired quite right, and the neutral side may not be so neutral. And the filaments are wired in series. But if you add these up, 35, 50, and 12.6 and 12.6, you don't get up to the full line voltage of, well, this was designed for 117, so they put a resistor in series, which is 47 ohms. Now notice that there are no parts values on the schematic, which is rather annoying, but they are listed down in here. So that is the dropper, and it's 1 watt, which is not... was being very skimpy, because when I did the math on this resistor dissipates just slightly over 1 watt, and you should really always at least double, so it should be at least a 2 watt, if not a 3. Also, this was designed for 117, and typically we have higher line voltages now, so I think I'm going to be increasing that to maybe something more like 68 or 82 ohms to compensate for having about 5 extra volts on the AC coming in. But the downside is it's also going to get hotter, because power is a function of current and resistance. So if you up the resistance and the current stays the same, it's going to dissipate more power. So I might have to go with a 5 watt resistor. Alright, anyways, so here is the chassis. The missing tube is the 50L6. I'll dig one up. Speaker's alright. It's got a few tears. Have been repaired, and it's developed another one, so I'll go over that a bit. It's had some work done. Basically, the original electrolytic is gone, and this new assembly has been put in place, but all the other paper caps are still there. So I'm going to be cleaning this up, and really you only need 3 caps. So it turns out that 2 of these are in parallel, I guess, to increase the capacitance. I think I can locate a single one that'll be the right value. Make this assembly smaller so it'll fit in there, because right now it's actually too big to fit. And I'll replace all the paper caps and check the 2 or 3 mica caps in there, and then see how it goes. So that's that. And yeah, I'll put a new line cord on here, and this is the antenna. And then there's the cap, which is metal and a bit rusty. So I'm going to strip this and repaint it. And here's what else came with it. So we got the original back, which is nice. This something kind of weird. It's like celluloid with metal foil on it that was glued on there, which is not in the greatest shape, but I'll do what we can with that after it's been repainted. Handle, not the original, gets the job done, but it doesn't quite line up perfectly. Be nice to find an original someday. Maybe there's one floating around out there. And these are the two knobs I got with the radio. I don't know if these are original, but again, they get the job done. So I'm going to get to stripping this and get to recapping this, and see how it goes. I'm not exactly sure what the best stripper is to use. I don't know what kind of paint this is, but I've got a can of this stuff, so I'll give this a try. I'm making good progress on recapping the radio, except for one little problem. Some of this wiring is natural rubber and very crumbly. Common problem with Philco radios from late 30s, early 40s. So, unfortunately, I have to replace that. And that includes the wires going down to the IF transformer down in here. So there's two ways to do it. One, like I did on this here, you can undo one end, crunch off all the old insulation, slide on some spaghetti or heat shrink tubing, or replace the wire. So here I put on some yellow heat shrink tubing. This red wire I just replaced entirely. I wanted to try both techniques to see how they worked out. And I think replacing the wire is a little bit easier, because crunching off all the old insulation and trying to slide on the tubing, getting around all twists and turns is a hassle. And then in case of this IF transformer, the wires are actually going down inside this can. So unfortunately, it's going to take a little bit of time, but I'm going to disconnect the 5 wires going down in here, undo the 2 nuts, pull the transformer out, replace the wires, and reinstall it. I checked for continuity on that and on this coil, and everything seems to be good. I also fixed up the speaker a little bit. There was a crack down in here. I fixed up with some Eileen's tacky glue, and then took some really well diluted glue and went over the whole cone to reinforce it. And then you can see there's some old repairs done here with maybe liquid electrical tape. I'm not quite sure, but everything seems to be in better shape now. I'll get some new lube in, some new grease in on the bearings on this tuning cap, but it's turning pretty good as it is. And this stuff's a little dirty, but otherwise looks to be in good shape, and I'll need to dig up a replacement 50L6 tube. So that's the one missing here. Now, as for the radio cabinet, well, that's first stripper I tried did not work at all. After a couple days, it was basically doing nothing, so I switched over to Citrus Strip, which took the paint off almost immediately. It just wrinkled up really quickly, came off no problem. I've already stripped, primed, and repainted the back of the radio. I went with some Navajo off-white. I think it looks nice. And now I'm working on the main cabinet, which had a bit of corrosion, so I'm using some naval jelly on that. I'm going to clean it off really good, spray on some primer, and then the same Navajo white. Okay, I took some reference photos, clipped the wires, and took 2 little nuts out. So I should be able to get this out now. Bend way back a little. So there we go. You see the crumbly insulation runs down inside. So let's see. I need to bend back these 2 brass things here, and I can pop the insides out. And I replace each of these wires with one of the same color. I carefully attached 5 new wires to the coil. Now I need to reinstall it. slides down inside the shield, and then it's secured by this brass clip. Also a bit of insulating material in here. I need to get wrapped around properly and get all the controls lined up. While I've been working on that IF can, I also finished stripping and removing the rust from the cabinet. I went ahead with primer and Navajo white. Here's the paint I've been using. Rust-Oleum Ultra Cover. Been pretty happy with the results I've gotten from this stuff. I remounted and wired in the IF transformer. And I've got all the paper caps replaced, and I use safety caps where appropriate. So we got a Y type here where it's going from one side of the AC line to the chassis, and an X type where this is going to be wired in right across the AC line. So that leaves the electrolytics. Now it came with this assembly, and here's my replacements, much smaller. And I'll need to dig up a 50L6. And one resistor left to replace, and I got to put a new AC line cord in there, and then I can try that out. And as for the cabinet, well, I finished with the primer, did a little light sanding, and then sprayed on the Navajo white. Came out pretty good. A couple little flaws here and there, so I think I'll let this cure up for a day or two. Do a little light sanding and then spray on a final coat. Alright, time for a power-up test finally. I finished going over the cone with the Eileen's tacky glue, so at the expense of just a little bit more mass to the cone, it's now much stronger but still pliable. And here's the finished recapping job. Now I still have the original 47 ohm filament dropper in here. I think I'm going to increase that to 68 ohms. But let's see how it works with the original, and temporarily tacked in a power cord. Once radio's working, I'm going to run a new power cord of smaller diameter, smaller gauge wire. This is really overkill. I'm going to run it through the strain relief hole here, and I'm going to add an inline fuse. But otherwise, electrical work is done. And I replaced the missing tube and lubed up the tuning cap. So let's give this a try. Plug it in, isolation transformer. Set for 117. Monitor the output current. On. We'll surge from the cold tube filaments. Now it's just going to draw power while the filaments heat up. Once rectifier starts working, we get some B plus flowing, the other tubes warm up, it should start drawing up a little more current. And there she goes. And we've got some life. Alright. Now the antenna is just a scrap of wire here, which I think is the original. Cool. The FDA warrant all. Rebound black, right there to put it up, and in. Down and he's fouled. Not exactly the best performance, but I wasn't expecting much, and I have not gone through and put the coils yet. So we've got IF transformer, 2 trimmers here, and there looks to be a trimmer on tuning cap. I have checked the cubes, they all test good. Also in a pretty noisy environment. A lot of computer equipment around.
That's 800-251-1579. Because farm is in our name, you know that we're the...
Not the easiest thing to tune because there is no gear reduction. It's just a direct drive. Have a light touch.
Feels like will be a victory here tonight. Absolutely. This is a team in Iowa that's absolutely fought, played an up-tempo.
The tragedy happened. His 4-year-old granddaughter was killed. He fell into a grate.
Cool. It's not. They don't always work the first time around. Alright, and hopefully with a little bit of tweaking it will work even better. And as for the cabinet, I did sand it and gave it another coat. I think it's looking pretty darn nice now. So, definitely in the home stretch. So now that it's working, I want to make it a little more electrically safe. Up the resistance on the series filament dropper because we have higher line voltages these days, and also this one's getting a bit discolored, and I'm going to definitely put a fuse on this guy. And see, I ended up not using the skinny caps after all. It turns out that shorter and wider was the way to go with this rather cramped chassis. So the long skinny ones were kind of sticking up like that, or I'd have to kind of wedge them in around here. So I'll put these shorter guys and that in there. Plenty of room to spare. Oh, it is for this. Well, that's how the original one was. That is, yeah, it gives you some protection, I suppose, or it leaves bleeds off charge from the chassis. That's just going to the chassis, which is floating to one side of the AC line through a 270k ohm resistor and a safety type capacitor right across it in parallel. It's a very common thing you see on these floating chassis sets, transformerless sets. Without that, I believe the issue is that charge can build up on this chassis, or if something else starts leaking power to the chassis, this will sort of bleed it off back into the power line and offers it a path of return. Also, I should mention when I wire this back up, I'll use a polarized cord and hook it up such that the hot and neutral make a bit more sense. In other words, the hot will go to the power switch, and the neutral will go to the side that's always wired in to the circuit. Here's one final look at it all back together with the back on. Guess I left it open at the top for ventilation. Kind of an odd fitting back, but hey, that's the way it is. Looking pretty well. The antenna placement and length has a huge impact on reception. Not surprising since it's a simple radio.
I have a proposition for you. I'd like to speak with you about this. What is it? It's not the way to go about politics.
As you can see, I left the dial scale off. But I'm going to hang on to it and perhaps get a reproduction made at some point, and the owner of the radio could maybe put it on himself. But next up, I'm going to move on to another radio of his. And here is that next radio that I will be working on. Something totally new to me. It's a European radio. I've never worked on one of those before. And it's from 1938. That is all I will say for now. Gotta do some research on it and then dig into this guy. For now, I hope you enjoyed this look at restoring a little Kent 4-tube radio.